take you back to January 1972. American Pie is the most popular song in the country. Bell bottoms are in style. Nixon is the president, and a special government cabal called the White House plumbers is plotting to break into the Watergate.
To this day, they didn't actually know why they were going in. The whole thing was fear-based.
Now listen, Washington, D.C. is an extraordinarily weird place. It's a city where power is currency, and the people in charge will lie, cheat, and steal to maintain it.
For God's sake, don't get caught.
White House Plumbers, the new HBO limited series from the producers of Succession and Veep, tells the story of E. Howard Hunt and G. Gordon Liddy, two Nixon fixers whose injudicious scheme would become an infamous scandal.
They did this because they thought it was a patriotic act.
We strike tonight.
You're probably familiar with Watergate. This series focuses on a lesser-known chapter in the saga. It involves faked heart condition, the robbery of a psychiatrist, and four separate attempts to break into the Watergate complex.
Howard! It's the White House.
Howard Hunt.
Howard, the president asked for a real son of a bitch to handle this Pentagon leak.
What do you need?
I want you to meet Gordon Liddy, toughest guy I know. He'll hold his hand in the flame of the candle.
I do not bend, and I do not break.
What's the trick?
There's one. Gets third-degree burns every time.
Please stop.
You now work for the committee to re-elect the president. Your new mission is to make sure he wins this election.
We'll intercept confidential information of the radical left.
What's the plan?
We're going to hit the DNC
At the Watergate.
Howard, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Welcome back from that intermission. Now you know all about E. Howard Hunt, and you're also getting learnified about G. Gordon Liddy. I have a couple artifacts for you because you hung out this late in the show, and that's the kind of thing that we like to do. All right, here we go. E. Howard Hunt, American Spy, My Secret History in the CIA, Watergate, and Beyond by E. Howard Hunt, with a foreword by William F. Buckley Jr. And now you know why that's so important, because you watched intermission tonight. But that's not the book I brought you here for. That's just me showing off. Here's Nixon's chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman. Haldeman was with Nixon from the 50s all the way through 1973 when he had to resign, right when Nixon had to step down. Now, if we were to dig in here, also that deathbed confession with Cord Meyer, it makes a lot of sense, because was Cord Meyer in Operation 40? Actually, let's go to the history blueprint before we break open the book.
Yeah, we should get some general grammar for the
What
audience.
is the Georgetown set?
Yeah.
Let's just type in Georgetown set. Oh, here they are. They're coming up. They're part of the Eastern Establishment ruling families. The Georgetown set says Cecil Rhodes. It's not just the Cliveden set with the Astor family in Britain. We have the Georgetown set with many movers and shakers.
George Tenet, yeah.
You got Hesus Angleton, Dean Acheson, Cord Meyer Jr. Here he is.
Cord
There
Meyer.
you go. Let's see. He worked under Dulles. Eugene Meyer. Is he related? The guy that run the Washington Post? That's who that is. Frank Wisner, OSS. Hesus Angleton, Scrolling Key at Yale. He went to the St. Paul's School. He's part of the World Federalist Movement, Yale University here. And Watergate, 1972. Does he have a relationship? Maybe, because his wife was Mary Pinchot Meyer. And as you just heard, if JFK was dating, how you want to say it, seeing his wife, then when she gets suicided, he might have had motive, means. And she had a diary. And this is where it gets really interesting, because Angleton and the CIA and all these things kind of come together. And is she like a Seth Rich type character back in the day? Watergate tapes, we don't know. But when you get into the various aspects of her actions,
Or is she a plant in order to gain
maybe
blackmail
somebody's
over
spy?
JFK? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or someone's spy. Exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
so like there's so many questions around this.
There are. There are
certainly
many,
he would. I get it totally why he would.
yeah, many questions, especially about this guy who was way up in the Anglo-American establishment chain of command. But now we can go back to not Hesus Angleton. Let's go back to Haldeman, because we do have a couple pages in here. In his book, printed in 1978, The Ends of Power, here in chapter 8, called The Side of the Smoke, This Side of the Smoking Gun. What my note says here from 15 years ago is Operation 40, JFK assassinations, Bay of Pigs, Nixon. But you got to read some pages to figure out what that means. At the bottom of page 37. So we had failed in our one previous attempt to obtain CIA cooperation. And now in Ehrlichman's office, June 23rd, 1972, the CIA was stonewalling me again. Not connected. No way. Then I played Nixon's trump card. So this is his chief of staff playing Nixon's trump card. The president asked me to tell you this entire affair may be connected to the Bay of Pigs. And if it opens up, the Bay of Pigs may be blown. Huh. Wow. I thought that was 10 years ago, Tony. What are they going to blow about that? What is that whole Bay of Pigs thing? Is that code for something? Huh. Well, it might be blown. Now, at this point in like 1972, 73, the Warren Commission had not released a Zapruder film to the public yet. So they had only seen still pictures up to the point where this whole Bay of Pigs thing could be blown. Turmoil in the room, Helms gripping the arms of his chair, leaning forward and shouting, "The Bay of Pigs had nothing to do with this. I have no concern about the Bay of Pigs." Silence. I just sat there. I was absolutely shocked by Helms's violent reaction. Again, I wondered, what was such dynamite in the Bay of Pigs story? Right. And he goes on, tracks back to the Bay of Pigs, smoking gun. So he's in his own process of figuring it out. Here on page 40, does the CIA have any evidence showing a conspiracy existed to assassinate Kennedy? No. And here's what I find most interesting. Bill Sullivan, the FBI man that the CIA called at the time, was Nixon's highest ranking loyal friend in the FBI in the Watergate crisis. He would risk J. Edgar Hoover's anger by taking the 1969 FBI wiretap transcripts ordered by Nixon and delivering them to Robert Meriden, a Mitchell crony, for safekeeping. It's likely to blow the whole Bay of Pigs thing. He might have been reminding Helms, not so gently, of the cover-up of the CIA assassination attempts of the hero of the Bay of Pigs, Fidel Castro. But I don't think that's what it was. I think it's right up to a CIA assassination attempt on, didn't they try to kill him in Florida before they got him in Dallas, JFK? Pretty sure there was an assassination attempt not too long before they got him in Dallas. Now let's go to page 133. We're talking all about the Watergate break-in. On June 23rd, 1972, the White House meeting I've already mentioned, I had requested that the CIA attempt to stop the FBI investigation of the Mexican drug bank through which the CRP checks had been laundered. So they're trying to pay the Watergate guys. They had to launder some money. This is Liddy's idea in the HBO series. He's like, don't worry about it, Howard. I got it worked out with these Mexicans, right? But this is the chief of staff for the president asking the CIA to stop the FBI from laundering Mexican bank drug money. This is just the guy's memoir. Don't worry about it. In the summer of 1973, I watched CIA Director Helms and Deputy Director Walters testify in outraged tones to the Irving Committee that the CIA had been duped at that meeting into assisting the White House cover-up. They'd been duped, Tony. Central Intelligence got duped by Nixon. The impression the two CIA officials gave was that the CIA was pressured into cooperating with us, even though they righteously insisted over and over again that the CIA had nothing to do with Watergate. Today, this is still the understanding of the vast majority of Americans.
Yeah, just
about
like the
CIA's
FBI
role.
and CIA don't have FBI's no involvement with January 6th or with the supposed kidnapping of the governor of Michigan, Whitmer, or the CIA having the FBI 1993 bombing World Trade Center. And the CIA, there's so many, it's almost
And so you got, them setting up Hunt and Liddy, and they'll be the sacrificial. And Liddy actually, he goes to prison and keeps his mouth shut, right? But here on the next page, Tony, I thought you'd appreciate this, page 134. On September 14th, 1973, Miles Copeland. What's his kid do? Oh, he's the drummer for the Police.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Miles Copeland, a former CIA agent. Didn't he work with MI6 on a bunch of coups, though? Is he really just CIA? Is he maybe part of the double cross system here? Anyway, he hinted in the National Review that James McCord might have received a non-order to sabotage the Watergate burglars operation. So So maybe McCord in the series does keep messing up such that they're like, hey, why don't your wiretaps work, McCord? He's an interesting guy.
Very
Mullen and
interesting.
Company,
That
Fred
is an interesting
Fielding,
allegation, actually.
Deep
I
Throat.
never considered that. It would make
Yeah.
sense, though. I mean, it would make sense. They would set up the Nixon organization for his reelection to, you know, to essentially
I am
get this
training the
honeypot.
guy. I'm training the guy who tells you to eat the bugs.
You trained, yeah, he certainly did. Yeah, but I mean, you set up the whole scenario. You get a plan in there. You say that, hey, look, you need you guys to do these things. And then you blame them for what they did, even though you're the one who set them up. It's like a classic sort of honeypot style.
There's lots of pictures of
And
Nixon and
trapping.
Kissinger in this book, really. Look, he's overworked. The president's got a lot to do. That's what that photo says. Very important man. Behind in this paperwork, though.
Juxtapose that to Joe Biden stuff.
He's like,
Wouldn't be any paper.
I fought the Nazis. I blackmailed the people who funded the Nazis.
So think about
kinda-
Nixon. Yeah,
kinda
he
true.
was.
Kinda true.
Yeah, he knew about game and DC and blackmail. He knew about the science of leverage. He just didn't. He eventually. got
I just
burned
can't
by it.
believe a guy named Tricky Dick didn't like Bohemian Grove. You know, you'd think he'd be a popular guy. All right, so that's everything on E. Howard Hunt. And 50 years ago, this was going on, and now you can watch the miniseries on HBO. The people who covered up Watergate are the same people who benefited from Kennedy's assassination and that whole Bay of Pigs thing that might have gone on back in the day. And when you look at the Georgetown connections and the mystery of Mary's diary and where that might have gotten off to, and who was looking for it, and other people who might have been involved, right? There's people who've talked about this. There's
The fact that that was in the safe and just serendipitously, it just goes missing. Like not missing, but it was taken by accident by a secretary at the same time. That, I mean, I don't know. Just it's fascinating. Just it's one of those weird contingencies and circumstances of history.
Now, one of the notes I have here on this page is it says James Truitt committed suicide on November 18th, 1981 in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. Evelyn later claimed that her husband's papers, including copies of Mary Pinchot Meyer's diary, were stolen by CIA officer Herbert Burroughs. And yeah, so nothing to see there. I'm sure the CIA had nothing to do with it. Right? Isn't that the safe answer? Safe words.
Safe answer.
Let's
The
see.
only answer allowed.
We got Cord Meyer
Let it control
obituary.
thoughts.
Let me just go. Here we go. Oh, come on. Browser. Cord Meyer, CIA chief behind clandestine funding of Encounter and Watergate break-in. Huh. Interesting. He was involved in the JFK assassination and Watergate. Was he involved in Bay of Pigs too? We're going to find out. We're reading the obituary. This is from Friday, 16 March 2001. Cord Meyer, who has died at the age of 80, was one of the Central Intelligence Agency's earliest recruits and figured in a number of the scandals that shook the organization in the 1970s. Though given several awards and lauded for his contributions to the United States intelligence, his habit of attracting excessive public attention eventually saw him put out to grass as the agency's frontman in, wait for it, London. Huh. London, Tony. It's almost like he's in charge of X2 over there. He was one
Who would have
of,
ever considered that London would be involved? I mean, that's just so.
I couldn't have guessed
out of
it. I
left
could
field,
not have
yeah.
guessed that the chain of command went across the ocean. I had no
It's
idea.
not like there's this thing called an Anglo-American establishment or anything.
No, not at all. So he's a Marine. He's in Guam. His brother was killed in Okinawa. Against his background, Meyer emerged from the war with strongly pacifist views, which led him to help the United World Federalists, a body aiming for world government, Tony. He also, right?
What a surprise. Like, what a surprise that they have a consistent philosophy with all the other individuals.
He might as well have been a
seeking
Rhodes
power.
Scholar.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I think he also joined Harold Stassen as a senior member of the American delegation to the San Francisco Conference, in which role he played a significant part in drafting the UN Charter, Tony. Cord Meyer helped to draft the UN Charter.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I forgot.
Or
about
Harold
that.
Stassen did, and he helped.
Yeah.
He was helped by Cord Meyer. After the conference, he went to do postgraduate research at Harvard University, but became increasingly concerned about events in the wider world. He had already become disenchanted by communist efforts to take over the United World Federalists, and his political views were sharpened in the wake of the Soviet blockade of Berlin in 1948. As that goes on, given his right-wing drift, he was stunned in 1953 to be told that the FBI had refused him a security clearance because he had shared a platform with a notorious leftist. That the lights in his college room had burned all night, Tony. Can you believe that? And that he had even written letters supporting prescribed organizations. Even in the paranoid atmosphere of the McCarthy years, these charges were so ludicrous that they were briskly dismissed at an internal inquiry. But the episode had a profound effect on Meyer. In the words of a colleague, he turned into something of a fanatic and became more Catholic than the Pope. From a commitment to peace and amity, he shifted toward anti-communist fervor. One of his closest associates at the CIA was James Hesus Angleton, the fanatical anti-communist MI6 mole inside CIA. I'm sorry, I was just reading into that a little too far. Fanatical anti-communist who nearly wrecked the organization with his belief that most of its senior staff were Russian moles. No, he was the mole. He was the mole. Anyway, the friendship extended far beyond working hours. In 1964, Meyer's divorced wife, the writer Mary Pinchot, was murdered as she walked along a Washington towpath. Now, 1964, Tony, I'm just checking. That's after Kennedy's assassinated, right?
Correct.
So if she still had a diary that they're trying to track down and she knew that they killed Kennedy, she might be like the weak link, right?
Correct.
Okay, now check this. Shortly afterwards, her sister and brother-in-law, Ben Bradley. Do you know who he is, Tony? Let me take you over here to the history blueprint. Yeah. Ben Bradley. He's the dude, press this button. Ben Bradley. Oh, is he part of the Boston Brahmin Bradley family? He's in the Cronenshield family. Oh, the Boston Brahmins, Americans elite.
Born in Boston, Massachusetts. Right. Yeah, right.
So this dude running the Washington Post, he is old time money.
What's his uncle? Yeah, great.
Right.
Frank. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has, I guess
so
editor.
Serious guys, serious people in this family of Mary Pinchot Meyer. You don't think Ben Bradley couldn't have got to the bottom of this murder? Unless he was one of the people who's like,
as the executive editor of the Washington Post
during Operation Mockingbird. Just to be clear, CIA operation.
1965. 1965, 1991 is when he is. So
all right, let's go back to the article now. Now we know who Ben Bradley is. Right. Shortly afterwards, her sister and brother-in-law, Ben Bradley, later executive editor of the Washington Post, discovered Angleton trying to break into Mrs. Meyer's home. Fucking James Hesus Angleton was trying to break in to get the diary. That's official story. Like, it's on the record. What for?
These are accusations that only Ben Bradley has made, or has others made and produced any evidence? I'm not discounting. I'm just like trying to understand.
This is the UK Guardian. This is their article. But this is well-known history, so they're not like breaking ground here. Yeah. But this is his obituary. Okay, this is in Cord Meyer's obituary.
I see, yeah, and
right.
Obituary says consider just understood history.
So dig, if you will, this picture.
That's so crazy. So Hesus Angleton is that obsessed with obtaining this footage that he's willing to go, or obtaining this diary that he's willing to actually break into. You'd think someone of his stature, with his power, would just have some crony go and do it. But
you would think he would delegate it, unless that means letting the circle, like whoever gets that diary could blackmail Angleton. Is the point. That's why Angleton has to go get it by himself. They frightened him off, but later found that he had been trying to steal Mrs. Meyer's diary containing details of her sexual liaison with President John Kennedy. The assumption has since been that Angleton could have only learned of the diary from Mary Meyer, though it was unclear why he wanted it. A workman hiding in nearby bushes was accused of the killing, but acquitted. No other suspect was ever found. Isn't that interesting, Tony? No other suspect was ever found for Cord Meyer's wife, one of the most prominent people in the intelligence community. Unsolved Murders. Next
Yeah, it's
on
kind of like
Unsolved Murders.
self-rich a little bit, you know.
Her Unsolved Murders right up there with JFK. The work Meyer was then doing for CIA remains shrouded in the usual mist, but the veil was briefly lifted by one of those cock-ups that occasionally enliven the spy business. When President Lyndon Johnson appointed Admiral Rayborn to head the agency in 1965, the swearing-in ceremony was attended by most of its leading executives, and the guest list inadvertently disclosed the name and position of everyone in the room. Meyer appeared as head of labor, student and educational operations. A couple of years later, the precise nature of his job was disclosed by Ramparts magazine. It found that Meyer had been distributing clandestine funds through a wide range of front organizations. It remains unclear whether such participants as Ford and Rockefeller foundations knew what was going on.
Oh, so he's like the Anthony Fauci,
right?
But like for what he's specifically supposed to do.
And again, this is the guy's obituary. I mean, this is pretty this is like, this is pretty spotty here. Yeah. Meyer blotted his copybook for a third time, candid. Watergate scandal. So we can read through the whole thing. He survived by his second wife after that. But there's more to it, is all I'm saying. He's not a nobody. When E. Howard Hunt's making that accusation in that deathbed confession, there's a lot of history behind that, and you have to take apart those words and look up the people and see what they were doing and how many of these things are checking out. Was he on the sidelines when JFK was killed? I think he probably was, because he wasn't the most ruthless and cunning among them, and they would tell nobody other than their psychopathic kill team. Cord Meyer would fit the bill to be on the inside of, the removal of an executive president, even if you're successful, leaves you susceptible to being blackmailed, which LBJ was, and a lot of the people that were in power from that situation continue to this day to have blackmail over their heads, which is why you don't have the JFK records in the public yet, because there are still people living who have gained from that, and it might also infringe upon some of our special relationship good time allies.
Yeah, most certainly. Wikipedia does a good job summarizing the diary accusation, and it's sort of restates exactly what you said. Ben Bradley states 95. I guess it was a memoir called A Good Life, that he and his wife Tony received an international phone call on the night of the murder from Pinochet Meyer's friend Ann Truitt in Japan, who was looking for James Hesus Angleton at the Bradley house. Truitt advised all of them, including Angleton, of the existence of the Pinochet Meyer diary and the urgent need to retrieve it, given what Truitt said were its details of Meyer's affair with President Kennedy during the last 2 years of his life. A decision was then quickly made by Bradley, his wife, James Angleton, and his wife, Cicely, and another friend present at the scene to keep the diary's existence from authorities. According to Bradley's 1995 account, one of at least 4 conflicting versions of the events surrounding the diary, search at Pinochet Meyer's art studio, Pinchot, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Pinchot Meyer's art
not till September 11th, 1973, 10 years later.
3:30 in the morning, me talking. Pinchot Meyer's art studio behind the Bradley house. I kept feeling like I was saying that wrong. Behind the Bradley house began the day after the murder. Bradley says he and his wife arrived at the studio with tools to obtain entry since they had no key, and upon arriving, they found Angleton in the process of picking the lock with special tools he had for that purpose. Quote, the fact that the CIA's most controversial counterintelligence specialist had been caught in the act of breaking and entering and looking for her diary, end quote, Bradley said, was not something he considered appropriate for public disclosure. With respect to the diary itself, he added, he and his wife, upon reading it and seeing it, revealed Pinchot Meyer's affair with the late President Kennedy, quote, concluded this was in no sense a public document, despite the braying of the knee-jerks about some public right to know, end quote. Oh, that's interesting.
You imagine Angleton trying to steal Ashley Biden's diary?
And then they conclude that there's nothing that needs to be released to the public.
Well, unsolved murder.
I mean, give me okay.
Unsolved murders.
Then she goes, she dies, and
Now I have many books over here on the shelf on Angleton. He's a whole different case study, and it's already 3:30 in the morning, so we can't get into that. But I want you to know there's a lot more to these stories than just meets the eye, because they don't let stuff meet your eye. They get their newspapers and media companies in between you and those pieces of evidence. And it takes people of courage and intrepid nature to get these things out. Angleton was not one of those courageous, intrepid people. He was a front for this double cross system, the double cross committee, X220 committee. It's all the same thing. It's Roman numeral system. It's undermining America.
It's the ultimate plan from MI6, from sort of the originator of sort of modern intelligence networks. He's sort of like the ultimate plan. Therefore, that's why he's considered to be the Oracle, because he knows so much about what has happened in regards to intelligence history, especially when it comes to both Anglo-American operations, particularly, I should say. Now,
in the British conquest to recolonize America, which is a thought that looks like this, the 20 Committee is a big deal, because the British conquest from 1781 to present, it's still ongoing.
Connections,
right? It's still going on. But if we go back to their specific World War II designed, how to undermine America, get us into World War II, plan out Pearl Harbor, etc., all the way up to James Hesus Angleton being schooled in Britain, where he spoke with a British accent, all right, at a young age, and then coming to America, and then, being the representative along with Cord Meyer, right? So the X2 counter-espionage
along with
branch,
Cord Meyer, there you go.
The American branch is X2. The British branch is the double cross, and X2 is subservient to double cross. So the people who work in X2, they are interfacing directly. And there's a bunch of Rhodes Scholars, Crane Brinton, Duncan Lee. There's a whole bunch of these dudes. Then
double cross is the originator,
right?
Like that's the model, and the copy is X2. And so
this is the deep state gaining control of OSS CIA.
Yeah. Yeah. And
here's a bunch of books.
No. It's not just gaining control. It's also flexing its muscle.
Yeah.
I mean, to showcase, like, this is what we're willing to do.
But that's what they
send a message,
right? And from there, they're like, "Hey, let's run a little Operation Gladio, and we can do Operation, Phoenix operations,
Phoenix
Air America,
operation,
and smuggle heroin and opium everywhere." Right? And these are part of the secrets behind the empire. There's a lot of books on here. Look, Psych War, Tony. Look at that.
So
you might find C.D. Jackson in this book, as a matter of fact. And then you just follow that history up to the Zapruder film. You'll learn everything in between.
Last time I hosted, I think.
Good. All right. So here's Hesus Angleton. He's part of, right. I mean, just follow the leader. There was Hugh Angleton, his dad. Do you know anything about Angleton's dad?
No.
Yeah, I don't have time for it right now, but he's also an interesting character in the formation of all these intelligence agencies, with the overlapping links between them and the murder of JFK. So it's going to be interesting as RFK Jr. continues to run for president. The history of the killing of his uncle and his father have become more transparent year after year. Book after book that discloses such information, the evidence is seeming to go toward not exactly explained by Oswald. There's a lot of pieces of evidence that exist that are not explained by Oswald. Just the whole Mary Meyer diary. Like, if she's just writing her notes, her cliff notes on banging JFK on LSD, come on. You really think Angleton personally has to break into her house for that? There's something bigger there.
Yeah.
And when you figure it out, it's substantial.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews, or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. there's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come